Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to the 6th lecture in the blockchain series. In this lecture, having studied about the various characteristics, uses, applications and varieties of blockchain, in this lecture we will take a brief look as to how do we go about building a blockchain. As we have seen, there are many varieties of blockchains, many platforms for developing the blockchains. We will take a brief look at how do we go about doing that. When we start about building a blockchain, one thing to remember is that blockchain after all is an information system. So, all the tools, techniques, concepts developed to build an information system are also applicable in the case of a blockchain. So, things like system development life cycle, SDLC, a technique, a tool developed in helping the building of an information system can also be applied in case of building a blockchain. For example, typical steps involved in SDLC like requirements gathering. To begin with, we have to identify the need and gather requirements that this particular information system is designed to serve, a problem it is designed to solve. And the next step of systems analysis, where we break it down in terms of where is the input coming, where is the output going, what is the processing that needs to be done, who are the people who need to use that, what is their perspective. So, which will involve various kinds of structured interview and brainstorming and other tools. Those steps can also be applied in terms of building a blockchain. Next, develop the architecture and select the tools. We can do high level design, low level design, all those things can also be applied in the case of a blockchain. Next, after we have done the requirements gathering, systems analysis, developed the architecture and selected the tools, we get into actual development itself. Then it will also include testing, various types of testing to make sure, and then implement the system, and then train the users so that they start using. One thing to remember, however, is that the technology and applications in this field are moving very fast. So, typically an IS SDLC project, one characteristic is that it takes time, it takes a little time to go through the SDLC cycle. All those steps may have to be compressed here. Things move very fast. We may have to quickly get something up and running and put it into implementation, then improve it. So, other tools like rapid prototype development or Scrum and other tools can also be are better suited for developing a agile development, and Scrum are better suited to develop a blockchain. And so, some of these steps specific to blockchain we need to consider before we go about developing a blockchain include: first, decide if blockchain is an appropriate solution. Though the advantages of blockchain has been given so much prominence that we may forget that there may be other tools, other techniques, other systems who may be more appropriate. For example, if it is just a matter of record keeping, which may need to change, a database system might be better. If we need to develop a tool for storing information and just making it available, not necessarily developing trust and other factors, again a database system or an ERP system might be better. If you want a reporting system where we should be able to go gather data, arrange it in the form of a dashboard, present it in various forms, typically an ERP system might be more suited for such an application. Or if we are trying to draw patterns from that, a business analysis system might be more suitable. So, depending on the situation, we need to first decide, is blockchain the most appropriate tool for this particular problem. So, some of the questions we need to ask are, what are the situations in which it is better to look at a blockchain, it is a more suitable solution. One is, parties need to trust each other. Remember, blockchain is a ledger, but typically a ledger is maintained by one party, the accounting department, whereas in the case of blockchain, the ledger is maintained by all the stakeholders. So, when I make an entry, when it gets approved, it should be done in such a way that other parties should be able to trust me. They may not know me, all of us blockchains by definition are worldwide, they are across the internet. So, nobody knows who I am, nobody has seen me. So, if I make an entry and that entry goes into the blockchain, others should be confident, everybody should be confident that it is a valid entry. That is, we all should be able to trust each other and all of us are jointly making entries into the blockchain. Second, it requires distributed consensus. Again, going back to a regular ledger, any entry made into a regular ledger, your boss has to approve that and auditors have to come and validate it, that is it. Then it becomes a legal entry. Whereas in the case of blockchain, remember, we use this concept of distributed consensus to arrive at a conclusion whether a transaction is valid or not. So, in any situation where parties who do not know each other, who do not meet each other, need to trust each other, a situation which requires distributed consensus, it requires everybody distributed updating the addition to the ledger, and entries and transactions once entered are irreversible, also called immutable. So, if these are the requirements of any situation, then blockchains would be the most appropriate solution, because developing blockchains requires a certain type of effort, a lot of resources and propagation. So, before we do that, we need to see if all these conditions are met and then decide. If one or more conditions are not met, are not required, then we have to look at different solutions other than blockchain. But if these conditions are the predominant requirements of any given problem or a situation, then blockchain would be the most appropriate solution. The second decision, once we have decided that yes, we need to build a blockchain for our situation, second question is to decide which type of blockchain is appropriate. We have seen that if we have a public blockchain, private blockchain, permission blockchain, permissionless blockchain, combinations of those, federated blockchain, public permissionless blockchain, public permission, like that. So, depending on that, for most business situations, it is turning out that a private permission blockchain is turning out to the most appropriate one, but for mass usage like cryptocurrencies and things like that, a public blockchain is more suitable. Whether it needs to be permissioned or permissionless is one more decision that needs to be taken after studying the situation at hand. The third decision to be made is to select a suitable consensus mechanism. Is it going to be proof of work, which has its advantages, its own disadvantages, which you have seen in some of the previous lectures, or it is going to be proof of stake, or should we consider something else, delegated proof of stake, for example. So, that is the third call one has to take before we go about designing and developing a blockchain. And then once we have decided that yes, we need a blockchain, our situation calls for these problems, and they can only be addressed by a blockchain. We have decided what type of blockchain, we have decided on a proof of consensus, then we need to go about selecting a development platform. Of course, depending on our needs, we can start from scratch and use a high level programming language like C++ or Java to develop a blockchain, but there are ready tools, the ready set of tools called platforms, and we need to select from, it is better we can select from one of them, because they make the process much more seamless, much more faster, and offer much more capabilities than we starting from scratch would be able to do on our own. There are quite a few platforms available today, and we will take a look at them briefly after this. We have, for example, Ethereum. When I discussed about Ethereum being a cryptocurrency yesterday, I also mentioned that it is a platform. It is a platform which can be used to develop other blockchains. There is one called Hyperledger. There are quite a few. We will look at some of them. Then next, once we have decided the platform, we need to decide what are the nodes. Like if it is a simple public permissionless blockchain like Bitcoin, simple, there is only one kind of node. Everybody can get into the system, they can do all the activities. Otherwise, we have to design how many types of nodes are there, what are the rights, what are the responsibilities, what are the capabilities. That is the next part of designing how our blockchain is going to look, how are we going to build that. Then specific characteristics applicable. How do we identify identities? How do you know when somebody comes and says that he is so and so? somebody comes and says he is Sudendra Hanumantrao, how do we ensure that this person is who he claims to be? One way to do that is by digital signatures. For example, everybody gets a certificate. We can say that, for example, the government of Karnataka has a program called eProcure. Anybody can download a tender document and digitally sign it. Digital signature is what? It is just an encrypted file. So, how does the government of Karnataka trust that my company is who it claims to be and we are eligible for bidding on this project? Government of Karnataka says it has identified 3 or 4 companies which issue digital certificates, TCS being one of them, a company called Encode being one of them. Government of Karnataka says you can send me a digital signature provided it is certified, we get a certificate from one of these companies. A digital certificate is nothing but a digital signature, a certification of my digital signature by an interested party, a trusted party. Government of Karnataka has said if you get a digital signature, if you get a certificate from any of these 4 companies, we will accept that. So, I go to TCS, there is a charge for that, I pay the charge, they give me a digital certificate which I can use as my digital signature, I download the tender document, sign. So, this is one way the government ensures my authentication. So, we need to decide how are we going to authenticate. One most common way is a digital signature, that is how most of the public permissionless blockchains do, but there may be other ways. I may make you sign a set of KYC documents, know your customer documents, based on that I may give you an ID and a password. One more way to ensure that authentication is done. We may require a biometric authentication, put your thumb imprint and things like that. So, we need to decide what kind of authentication our system, does it need authentication, what kind of authentication we are going to consider, what kind of permissions, does everybody be allowed to see everything, does everybody be allowed to mine, is everybody allowed to verify transactions, this we need to decide for each entity, for each node. Then what kind of handshake agreement, in encryption there is a thing called a handshake agreement, sometimes may get a bit technical, but let us assume that that is one of the factors that we decide, what kind of handshake agreements. Whenever a party comes in to do some entry, other than authentication, what other handshake, what protocols they follow and things like that. And of course, whenever we have encryption, one of the big challenges is managing the keys. Other than public key encryption, that is asymmetric encryption, where key distribution is not an issue, but there are other costs to that. Otherwise, how do we, for each session, we obviously cannot be using asymmetric encryption. How do we manage the key management? How do we manage the key distribution per session and things like that? What kind of keys are going to use? What strength of keys? Strength of keys is typically measured in the length of the key. A 2048 bit key, 1024 bit key. The general assumption is bigger the key size, safer the encryption. These are all some of the issues we need to decide in advance before we go about developing a blockchain. And next, do we need smart contracts? If it is just an accounting or a ledger system where we just store data that people can verify and use it for whatever purpose, maybe we may not need a smart contract, because it requires effort to develop and build smart contracts on top of a blockchain. So, then we have to design, do we need smart contracts? What should this smart contract do? Do we need multiple types of smart contracts? Those are some of the decision factors when it comes to smart contracts. Then of course, an administration user interface, how does it look to users, how user friendly it is, what rights do administrators, if it is not a public permissionless blockchain, if there are administrators, it is a private blockchain, who are the administrators? Is it going to be one person, a group of entities, are they going to be in a do they work in a delegated fashion, can they delegate to others? If a group of administrators who are chosen by other participants, if one of them is not fulfilling the requirements, not fulfilling the job, how do we replace them? How do we replace existing administrators with others? These are all the issues that need to be considered under this heading, designing a administrator and a user interface. And blockchain, in most cases as we have seen, except in the case of perhaps cryptocurrencies and some other cases, they have to interact with outside systems. Even in the case of cryptocurrencies, they have to, whenever an exchange comes into the picture, a cryptocurrency blockchain may have to interact with the wallets, hardware wallets of that exchange. So, another factor to be considered is what are the interfaces that this blockchain has to interact with, and that they need to be designed in advance. interfaces to hardware wallets, interfaces to databases. In fact, it is now a complete area of research in terms of what databases are most suitable to store the blockchain data. As a matter of fact, I mentioned in that one of the earlier lectures yesterday that the size of the Bitcoin database is reaching 100 gigabytes. As databases grow bigger and bigger, even new techniques are required to make them run with appropriate performance. As data gets bigger, it tends to slow down. So, what database structure is suitable to meet the performance requirements? And that is one more factor we need to design. What kind of performance our blockchain has to fulfill? How many transactions should it be capable of handling? And what kind of input does it take? Sometimes we may have to take input from other sources. To go back to the pizza example with the smart contract, how does the blockchain know that the pizza has been delivered? The delivery man takes my signature, scans a barcode or takes some number, takes my certificate and submits it to the blockchain. How does the blockchain read that and authenticate that? So, such factors also need to be designed, thought of and designed in advance. So, as you can see, putting a blockchain is not simply developing IT system, something that we can just throw out. We have to first design it properly, only then does it fulfill all the requirements that we are intending to use the blockchain for. Before we dive deeper, let us briefly look at what is a platform. I used a word development platform, giving Ethereum as an example. What is a development platform? A platform, and before that let us address why do we need a development platform? Why can't I use just Java to start building my blockchain? Why can't I use just C++? Why can't I use Python before I start building a blockchain from scratch? The importance of a development platform is that they make the task of developing a system much easier. They come with a set of tools, techniques, various hooks and links and protocols that we don't, it's like building a car by making all the parts. Building a blockchain with starting from scratch like C++ or Java is like building a car with making all the parts. We build the engine, we build the transmission, we build the wheels, we build the steering, we build the chassis, we build the body, everything. You can say how long that will take, how much effort it will take. Instead, there are companies which provide all these systems. There are companies which build a chassis, they build an engine, they build the transmission, they do the wheels and brakes and the fuel system. There are companies which are building all these components already. We can just put them all together into one package. That is what platforms do. Platforms are this ecosystem of the various tools already available, so that we can make the product much better in a much faster time, because some of these tools are so sophisticated and our own it takes a lot of effort to develop them. Instead, we can get those capabilities and put together a very sophisticated system in a very short time with very little effort, and this ecosystem of all these tools put together is what is called a development platform. So, a development platform, let us look at more detail, is a package to manage a full system development. They have tools to code the product, they have tools to present the product on the screen, they have tools to test the product, they have tools to archive it, maintain versions and link to databases, link to your modem and other telecom systems, link to email. All these tools are provided in one single platform. So, it is a package to manage a full system development. Typically, a platform can support one or more languages. The two, for those of you who have come from the IT background, the two most common development platforms you would have heard of are .NET from Microsoft and Java or J2EE, Java 2 Enterprise Edition, which is maintained by Oracle, but publicly available for free. So, both support, we will see those two in a little more detail for comparison. Just to make the concept clearer, they should support one or more programming languages. When I mean languages, I mean programming languages. They have a program editor and version manager. We need a tool to write our programs, save our programs, make sure that the previous versions are all available. When I make changes, they track the changes. So, we need a program editor and a version manager. In case of blockchain, one key element of blockchain is building the consensus mechanism, meaning the platform, if it includes consensus mechanisms, it makes our job much easier. The moment I say I need to have proof of work, if this platform offers me a ready-made code to build in proof of work, that makes my job much easier. I do not have to start from scratch there. They need to have the platform support authentication and permission tools, all three, whether it is .NET, Java or various blockchain platforms. They give us various tools to manage authentication. How do we accept digital signatures? Do we accept ID password? Do we accept a biometric? How do we get those? How do customers authenticate themselves? How do we manage permissions? There is something commonly used called RBAC, role based access control. A similar concept, if I am logging in as an employee, I can just go and look at my records and my salary. On the other hand, if I log in as a manager, so I am the same person, but my role is different. As a manager, I can look at the salary of all the people who report to me. So, based on that, permissions can change. So, we at times we will need that kind of role based access control in blockchains also. All these platforms offer tools for managing authentication and managing the permissions. Tools for interfacing with the databases. Today, almost by default, there is a protocol called ODBC, online database connectivity, and that most packages use to connect to databases, and same thing might be included in a blockchain platform. So, most platforms give tools like ODBC to connect with different databases. Most platforms also give facility, they have advanced tools for modularization. For example, I develop printing routine. I develop a printing routine that can be used anywhere. So, the program that is built for printing on a laser printer, can we put it in a separate box, separate module. So, wherever I need, I can call and use it. Every time I do not have to use the code. Or in the case of blockchain, suppose I need a code for my smart contract to read a barcode or to read signatures and store them and match them. This may be needed in multiple situations, not just while pizza delivery, it is going to be useful in other situations also. So, the code that we have developed, the piece of software we have developed to read barcodes and scan and interpret them will be applicable in other situations. I should be able to take it and keep it away and use it wherever I need. This concept is called modularization. Platforms give you tools to manage modularization, which helps us not repeat the work. If I need to use that barcode scanner anywhere else, I can just take this piece of code, piece of software, put it out there. I do not need to redo it all over again. And in case of blockchains, the platforms also will support writing smart contracts, since they are a critical element of developing a blockchain. As I mentioned, for those who are in the IT world, the two most common platforms you run across are the Microsoft .NET and Java J2EE platforms. For the sake of clarity, just let us briefly look at what those two platforms do. How do they compare? Both are excellent platforms to develop an IT system today. It is almost like a black and white situation. Do I select a .NET platform? Suppose I need to develop an accounting program, I need to develop a payroll program, I need to develop a banking software. It is not I need to develop a ticketing reservation system. Today the question is pretty simple. Do I select a .NET platform or do I go for a Java J2EE platform? And remember, when I say platform, these are software development environments which come up with all these tools. So, let us look at a sample comparison between Java and .NET. .NET comes from Microsoft, and Java or J2EE or J2SSE comes from the Java community. It is a community of open source programmers. Voluntary contributors are contributing to this effort, but it is managed by the Oracle Corporation. The development environment, the editor and saver and version control is provided by a tool called Visual Studio in case of .NET. In case of Java, it is provided by a tool called Java Development Kit, JDK. The languages .NET supports are Visual Basic, Visual C++, C Sharp and a couple of others, whereas Java predominantly supports only one language, that is Java. You can embed C++ within Java and things like that. but the standard language in the Java J2EE is this language called Java. The runtime environment, that is, when a program is running on a server, if I need to run that program. For that program to run on my laptop, I need something called a runtime environment. Let us not worry too much about it, but there is something called an RTE. Remember, in case of Ethereum, I mentioned something called EVM, that is what it is. In case the runtime environment in Microsoft .NET is called .NET Framework. In case of Java, it is called Java Virtual Machine or JRE, Java Runtime Environment. The tools for graphics, all those animations we do, the pictures we show, nice colors we show, and numbers and the way they appear on the screen. These demand graphic tools. Graphic tools help us do all those animations and various presentations. .NET has excellent graphic tools included. J2EE also has excellent graphic tools included. For modularization, that is sharing and reuse, I develop one application. Suppose I am developing a banking software. One of the things we commonly use in banking software is how to calculate simple interest or compound interest. If I develop a program to develop simple interest, it will be used in a number of cases throughout the banking program. So, I can modularize this and make it available for sharing by everybody, likewise with compound interest. So, for enabling that, for enabling one program to be written once and be included in number of other programs, Microsoft has an architecture called DCOM, also what are called DLL, dynamically linked libraries. Java has a series of tools to help us with modularization, like Enterprise Java Beans, struts, springs, and new ones are coming all the time. They all need what is called an application server. Microsoft again uses .NET as the application server. In case of Java, there are quite a few application servers. Some of you might have heard some of these terms like WebSphere, JBoss, WebLogic. These are all what are called application servers. They actually run the application for us. We will not go into that in detail. Today on internet, the protocol, that is, I might be using a Intel based laptop, you might be using a desktop, somebody might be using an Apple, somebody else may be using a Linux based machine. If I send a message to you on email, or if a bank is running like HDFC Bank, if I run HDFC Bank's website, home site on my Intel based laptop and they are running it on a Linux based machine, how does it work on all the systems? It is written in once, there is only one server. How do they all understand each other? Even though they are such different systems, how do they all understand each other? In real life, my mother tongue is something else, and many of you may have different mother tongues, but we all understand each other because we speak a common language, English, as in this case. It could be another language in another case. So, English acts as a common binding language or a protocol amongst all of us. Every language does the same. So, the protocol that the language that internet speaks, so to say, loosely talking, the common conventions that anybody on the internet has to follow is what is called TCP/IP. So, today if I want to develop my program on Windows and want any other system running elsewhere, including Windows, to understand and run it the way, you follow what is called TCP/IP, and .NET supports TCP/IP. TCP/IP stands for Transaction Control Protocol / Internet Protocol. For the non-technical ones, let us assume that this is the language that everybody has to speak on the internet for all of us to understand each other. .NET supports TCP/IP, J2EE, Java also supports TCP/IP. Microsoft supports various kind of databases. The database in the background could be Oracle, it could be SQL Server, it could be any other database, for example. They all are supported by a common language called ODBC or LDAP. Java also supports JDBC and JNDI. There is a service called Directory. Microsoft supports Active Directory. Java supports also various directories. If you do not understand these terms, do not worry. Just to show that a platform provides these capabilities. They provide a capability, MySQL, that is the other type of database I was thinking of. Microsoft supports SQL Server, MySQL, or the old DBase or Oracle, anything. Java also supports all those databases using JDBC, and they support a simple way of scripting, simple way of writing programs using a language called a script. Microsoft has Visual Basic Script, Java supports JavaScript. So, my purpose of showing this is to show what a database can do, what a platform can do. While developing an information system, we have to do all these things. So, there is no point in us developing tools and code for all of these. Platforms already provide all these tools. So, once they provide, what I have to do is to just put them together and write my application. If I am writing a banking application, I will focus on doing how to do banking rather than worrying about how to control, how to connect to the database, how to connect to the internet, how to draw all the tools. The platforms provide all those tools. They make our job much easier, so that we can develop a very sophisticated system with all the capabilities with much lesser effort and also make it reusable. If I develop a banking system for India, the banking system I developed for say Sri Lanka might be very different, but I can use the components from this to build a brand new banking system for Sri Lanka, applicable in Sri Lanka, because these tools provide us the capability to modularize that and use the modules, make them reusable. That is the importance of platforms in information systems. They make our job far easier than we can ever think of. So, that is one reason why I took a small digression to explain the importance of platform as a concept. So, for blockchain also, there are a number of development platforms. They help, each platform comes with its own characteristics. For example, a application developed in .NET on the back end may not easily interact with another application developed in J2EE. It requires much work to make them work together. So, before we select a platform, we need to make sure that that particular platform offers us the features to work with. For example, Microsoft supports Visual Basic and Visual C++. It does not support Java, whereas JDBC platform, J2EE platform supports working only in Java. If all our programmers know only Visual Basic or C++, it is much easier, it is much better for me to develop my application in .NET in comparison to another company where most of the developers are from the Java world, in which case there is no point going for the Microsoft, the .NET platform. So, like that, in case of blockchain platforms also, they bring different strengths to the table. Each platform has different strengths. So, before we select one platform, we should carefully evaluate whether this platform has all the requirements that we are looking for. And second, the field of blockchain is evolving very fast. So, one more thing to keep in mind before we select a blockchain platform: who is supporting this platform, who are developing this platform. All the platforms are still evolving, they are still developing, obviously much work needs to be done. So, it is also important to see how is this platform evolving, who are the parties who are supporting it. If I develop my blockchain today and I expect this program to last for the next 25 years, will the platform be there, will the platform develop to take into account new technologies coming into the picture. So, that is one more factor to be considered before we select one blockchain platform over the other. Having said that, let us look at a few of these development platforms. One is obviously Ethereum. This is the same slide as I have presented yesterday. It is a platform for developing public permissionless blockchain by default, and it also provides its own currency. So, if I use Ethereum platform to build my blockchain, I can also launch my own cryptocurrency. If it is not for cryptocurrency, it still gives me a provision to use a token. A token may have monetary value, token may not have a monetary value. I can still use a token and use it for some purpose within my application, which can be pretty useful in many situations. As we have seen, it provides incentives based on proof of work model, but it is also now it is supporting incentives based on proof of stake. So, depending on whether we want, we can choose either of the incentive scheme. It provides a client run model, that is, if we develop a blockchain platform, anyone who wants to run that particular blockchain on their system, it provides a runtime module to run it on their system. Ethereum supports smart contracts. Smart contracts is probably a requirement for blockchains today. Ethereum was one of the first platforms to support smart contracts. it provides a language called Solidity. I have made a spelling mistake here as Solidify, it should be Solidity scripting language. Ethereum's security initially was a bit suspect, but now it is improving dramatically. This platform, though out of the box, it builds a public permissionless blockchain. It can also be used for developing permission blockchains, and most importantly this platform has lot of industry support. That is, Ethereum actually was developed by one person, his name is Vitalik Buterin. If those of you have access to YouTube, you can look for, search for his name. Various places he has explained how he has developed Ethereum, where does he see it growing, what is his opinion on various other blockchains. Very thoughtful, knowledgeable person, very young person. He is one person who actually developed Ethereum, but today it is no longer dependent on him. There is an independent group of big companies, they formed a consortium and an alliance. So, they are supporting Ethereum, they are supporting its development called Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. Why is it important for us? It is important because so many parties see the importance of this particular platform. They are putting resources. Ethereum is available for free, by the way, but they are putting resources to developing it, making it do more things, do better things. Tomorrow a new technology comes in, say for example quantum computing, something that people are talking about. These parties have enough resources to include that in the Ethereum platform to support for quantum computing. So, we can be fairly certain that if we adopt this platform, as we move forward, the platform will keep up with the requirements and platform will keep up with the developments in technology. And importantly, as of today, the industry giant Microsoft is supporting Ethereum development platform on their cloud. So, with minimal effort today, we do not even have to own a computer or any computing platform. We need to own a computer to access that, of course, but not to run it. We can go onto the Microsoft Azure cloud, build our platform, build our blockchain from scratch using the Ethereum platform. So, it is one of the most commonly developed. In fact, JP Morgan's own JP Morgan coin is built on the Ethereum platform. This is a simple example of a code in Solidity. It is a contract for developing some coin. Those of us who are comfortable with JavaScript can see a lot of similarities with JavaScript. It is a fairly easy language. Anyway, when I am giving a discussion, let me make a correction also. The language should be Solidity. So, those who are very comfortable with Java and JavaScript can see the similarity between Solidity and JavaScript. It is easy to use language. The second big development platform is called Hyperledger. It is a forum sponsored by Linux Foundation. Again, people from IT, even those who are not from IT probably recognize the word Linux. It is probably one of the most common operating systems today, available for free. Lot of companies are supporting it. They do not charge you for the operating system itself. You can, if you want help and if you want support from them, they will charge for that, but the operating system itself is completely free. There are many types of Linux today. There is SUSE Linux and Red Hat Linux and Ubuntu. All these are supported by independent parties. So, it is a very popular operating system today. It is managed by a foundation called Linux Foundation. Again, a bunch of important companies are together joined Linux Foundation to develop another platform for developing blockchain called Hyperledger. And interestingly, many of the companies are members of both. They are members of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. They are also members of the Linux Foundation's Hyperledger platform. Companies like Microsoft, IBM, JP Morgan, many of them are members of both platforms. The idea of this Hyperledger is aimed at developing open source blockchain platforms. It is an open source in the sense that anybody can download these tools. You can look at the code. If you want, I can modify the tool to meet my requirements and give it to others for free. These tools are completely free. The code is available for distribution amongst ourselves. We can make changes, we can look at the code and we can use it completely for free. There is a complete movement called the open source movement or the free software movement. There are some minor differences between them. The foundation, the driving force for this foundation is that thought that software is free. Major technology and finance players are members. Not only are they members of this foundation, each of them have independently developed some tools and they have contributed to this. IBM says I have developed this particular tool called Hyperledger Fabric, I will give to this foundation for free, anybody can use it. Even though IBM spent resources developing it, they made it available to everyone. This platform Hyperledger is not one single application, they have developed a series of tools meant for different purposes, and each one can function independently as a platform. There are right now 5 tools or 5 platforms one could say. One is called Hyperledger Fabric. This is probably the most common among all Hyperledger tools used. In one of the later lectures we will look at a pilot study of building a blockchain for some for settlement between banks. That is an example of a blockchain built using Hyperledger Fabric. There is one more tool contributed by some third parties called Hyperledger Iroha. Hyperledger Fabric is predominantly meant for developing blockchains which run on the desktop or a laptop platform or the PC platform. Hyperledger Iroha is a tool to enable developing blockchains running on the mobile platform. All of us use smart chains. So, if I want to develop a blockchain whose main customers are more smart chain users, I may be better off using Hyperledger Iroha. Hyperledger also has an interface to Ethereum. Hyperledger, using its tools, you can also build a platform which can run with Ethereum. So, that is provided by a tool called Hyperledger Burrow. It is also a runtime environment, Ethereum virtual machine based blockchain. So, if you want to develop a blockchain which conforms to Linux, can also run on a Linux platform, we can use Hyperledger Burrow. There are 2 more tools, Hyperledger Sawtooth and one more called Hyperledger Indy. Hyperledger Sawtooth also is another platform for developing certain types of Hyperledger blockchains, and Hyperledger Indy is a common tool which can be used by all other platforms. It is used for identity management. We have seen that except even in public blockchains, one needs to prove who one is. If I am consistently buying Bitcoin, if I am buying and selling, every time I need to prove that I am the person who is, I am the person who owns this Bitcoin, I am the person who is buying a new Bitcoin, I am the person who is selling this Bitcoin. So, establishing identity in the virtual world is quite a task, and this tool Hyperledger Indy makes it easier to verify identities, gives a number of ways which I have discussed already. Tools like providing your certificate, your biometric, your ID password, your PIN, your smart card, various tools, and maybe providing an OTP through a smartphone or using those QR codes. So, this tool makes that job easier. We can build in this identity management into any of the blockchains developed from these other tools. So, it also provides other tools like one set of tools called Cello for deployment. Once we have built a blockchain, we have to deploy it into various sources, we can use that. There also provides a set of tools for analytics. Analytics means we have collected so much data, how do we read all that data, see patterns and draw information from that. There is a whole field today called business analytics, which is a very growing field. Lot of work is going on, lot of research is going on, lot of jobs are being created. So, to do analytics, you must have heard of analytics tools like R and SPSS. Hyperledger provides one more tool, bunch of tools, not exactly same as them, but to work within the Hyperledger platform called Hyperledger Explorer. So, this Hyperledger also is becoming another very popular and powerful tool which is constantly being developed. So, a lot of blockchains today are being developed based on the Hyperledger platform. There are other platforms, so many platforms are coming up constantly on a daily basis, because both these platforms support particular type of blockchain, like Ethernet supports Ethernet based blockchains with its own proof of work or the consensus model, its own way of coming up with tokens, its own way of attaining consensus, distributing to nodes, its own way of performance. So, they both have their own strengths and their own limitations based on, and both are general purpose, they can be used for any purpose. There are tools coming up which are specialized for certain purposes only, like a financial sector has its own requirements, performance being one of them. Neither of them may be good enough, neither Hyperledger nor Ethereum may be good enough to match those performance needs. So, there are new platforms emerging which will support financial industry, focus will be on performance and ensuring. There are applications like Ripple which are based more on a trust based network. They do not use consensus, they use a trust based network. So, for those, for developing systems which are rather trust based network, there is no concept of mining, there is no concept of distributed consensus, but there is a concept of developing a network of trusted nodes. There are platforms emerging to support such applications also. These are the two most common today, but there are quite a few. Here is a good comparison on some of the key parameters of some of these other platforms. There is a platform called Corda, which is developed by a company called R3. By the way, Ripple itself by Ripple Labs is a platform. There is one more platform called Credits, one more platform called Coco. The list goes on and on. These two are the most common. Ethereum is a generic blockchain platform, that is what I meant. Ethereum can be used to develop a blockchain for pretty much any purpose. Hyperledger Fabric, they have taken only one of them out of the 5 tools, they have taken the most commonly used tool, Hyperledger Fabric. It is a modular blockchain platform. What does it mean by that? In Ethereum, I have to implement everything together. If I build Ethereum, the currency or the token is built into that. The Ether, once I build a Ethereum platform, a blockchain based on Ethereum, it provides all the capabilities plus the currency also. It includes mining. Whereas I may want to build a blockchain without the currency, without the token, without the mining. I can add it later. Right now I do not need that. I just need a blockchain with distributed consensus and a consensus mechanism, variety of nodes, authentication. So, if I need to do only that much and add parts as and when I need, I might preferably use Hyperledger Fabric because it is a modular platform which lets me add one of these things. Remember, Indy is used only when I need identity management, right. So, for developing modular platforms, Hyperledger is its strong point, whereas R3 Corda, as I was just alluding, it is a specialized distributed ledger. In fact, look at that, they do not even call it as a blockchain, it is a distributed ledger platform for financial industry. As I said, financial industry has certain specific requirements. This platform is developed specifically to help develop blockchains and distributed ledgers for that platform. Credits, one more platform, is a blockchain platform with a decentralized ledger technology, which is a general platform. Coco is a blockchain ledger framework, that is, it gives certain tools, based on that I can design blockchains with more control than I can do with perhaps Ethereum and Fabric. The programming language supported by Ethereum is Solidity, whereas Hyperledger Fabric has its own language called Go. It also supports Java, which makes it far more applicable because so many more people, we have a whole mass of people, mass of skill level sets, available manpower for very skilled in developing Java. Corda and R3 supports a language called Kotlin. Credits supports Java and JavaScript, even better. Coco supports C++, C#, various languages for smart contracts. So, as you can see, these are much more flexible, they have more support for more generic skills, whereas in case of Ethereum I have to learn Solidity, whether in case of Corda I have to learn a language called Kotlin. And compare this, when I said platform, compare with this slide. As you can see, the features are different in this case, the features that they support, but the basis for comparison remains the same. So, that is how we compare platforms. If you can see on the first column, the features here, these are different for each platform, but comparison is based on those features. So, that way this is almost similar, the features are different to compare, but once we define the features, we compare platforms to define their strengths and weaknesses. Governance, who is governing what goes into Ethereum next, what advances go in. When there is a problem with Ethereum, which has been in the past once or twice, who fixes that? That is the governance mechanism. In case of .NET, Microsoft does. If there is a problem, I go to the Microsoft company and say, look, there is this problem with the graphic tool. Microsoft will fix it and send us a patch. In case of J2EE, there is the Java Foundation run by Oracle. I can go to them, a bunch of voluntary programmers will fix that. So, who is the governance? In case of governance, Ethereum is Ethereum developers, but this information is to be updated. Now, there is a Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, there there is a group of companies who have joined this consortium or this voluntary organizations to which they are all contributing efforts, they are the ones who are maintaining, they are the ones who are governing. If I develop some flashy new tool for Ethereum and I want it to be part of the Ethereum distribution, I go to Ethereum Enterprise Alliance and tell them, look, I have developed this tool, take a look. They will evaluate. If all of them agree that it is a good tool, they will include it next time. If there is a bug, if there is a problem, if there is a need, I can contact the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, they will consider that and fix the problem, somebody will voluntarily fix it, they will distribute it. Linux also works exactly the same way. There is a Linux Foundation. If there is a problem with Linux, bug, I can report it to them, they solve the problem. If I develop some nifty tool in Linux, I want everybody to enjoy the benefit of this tool, I can present it to Linux Foundation, they will include. Next time whoever downloads, if they include my application, from tomorrow onwards, whoever downloads the Linux operating system, they will get my tool also included in that. So, that is the governance. In case of Ethereum, it is a Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. In case of Linux, it is the Linux Foundation. In case of Carda, it is this company R3. In case of credits, there is an organization called Credits Project. Microsoft has its own platform other than Ethereum, it supports Ethereum, called Coco. Ripple is also a platform, it is supported by an organization called Ripple Labs. It is a commercial company, commercial organization, but they are the ones who provide governance for all of Ripple. Is it open source? What is open source? Can I download this application for free? Can I look at the way it is software has been written? Can I modify that software for my purposes? Can I do all that? Then there are certain organizations have published standards to meet this concept called open source, but generally these are the 3 or 4 characteristics for a software to be open source. Linux, for example, is open source. I can go to any of these sites, download it for free, use it, give it to my friend, I can make changes because the software is available, the code is available. If in case of Windows, I do not know what is the code behind that. If I download Windows, if there is anything, I have to go back to Microsoft. I do not know what they are doing inside. In case of Linux, I can see how it is done. If I want, I can change that. I can change the look, color, how the cursor looks. So, that is some of the requirements for a software to be open source. So, is this platform open source? Ethereum is. We can do all these things after downloading the Ethereum platform. Hyperledger Fabric is a open source platform. R3 Carda is not. It is controlled by this company R3. They may make the code free, available for free, but they control the rights, how to make changes, how to propagate them, what changes go in, what advances go in. Credits is open source, free. Coco, even though it is controlled by Microsoft, it is still open source. And how do they provide consensus? Ethereum provides consensus based on mining, based on proof of work, but modification now based on proof of stake also. Hyperledger provides a consensus based on broad understanding of consensus that allows multiple approaches. And at Ethereum, it is at a ledger level, this is at a transaction level, that is a level of detail we will not go into. R3 provides consensus based on what are called notary nodes, the way notaries do. Today, if I get a document, if I get a certificate of ownership, it is just a paper, document written on paper. How does it get validity? Because a notary notarizes that. He says, I have verified it is true and all. Carda implements the concept of notary. There are certain nodes which are allowed to provide consensus, certify transactions. So, its consensus is arrived by a notary concept. Credits includes new consensus in the form of delegated proof of stake. Remember delegated proof of stake from yesterday's discussion? In a blockchain, certain nodes are given the rights, the other nodes elect that these are the nodes who are allowed to certify the transaction, who are allowed to validate the transaction to arrive at a consensus. Most of them also include mechanisms where if out of 10 nodes chosen to provide consensus, if one of them is misbehaving or doing things wrongly, there is a mechanism for the other nodes to vote them down and select a new node. And there is also the Byzantine fault tolerance, one more method. Credits provides those 2 methods, and Coco provides a completely different consensus which we have not looked at, called Paxos and Caesar consensus or other consensus algorithms. So, platforms can differ on which consensus mechanism they provide. So, this should be one critical element on how do we choose our platform based on what we need. How does it support smart contracts? Ethereum supports using Solidity, using something called smart contract code. We have to write code to separate. We can write any smart contract we want. So does Hyperledger, so does Corda. It also has a smart contract load and a smart level. Credits supports self-executing smart contracts. Coco supports self-enterprise smart contracts. Currency, Ether. Ether includes a currency called Ether. They can also be converted into just valueless tokens. Currency has a monetary value. When we say currency, which automatically means that it has a monetary value, instead we can use it as a token of denomination, some worth, not necessarily monetary. Hyperledger does not have tokens. That is one critical difference between Ethereum. It has no tokens or a currency, but if necessary, there is an additional module called chain code. We can include that to build currency within Hyperledger based blockchains. Corda does not have any currency. Credits has an internal cryptocurrency. Coco has no currency. Ripple, it is not a blockchain platform, it is a payment system platform. It also has its own currency called RPX. Does it allow permissioning? Ethereum by default is a permissionless blockchain, but we can if necessary. Whereas Hyperledger lets us various types of permissions. Each node can have a different set of permissions. Very fine grained. At node level, we can assign permissions on what they can do, what they cannot do. Whereas R3 has coarse grained. At broad level, we have classes of nodes. Anyone belonging to that class of nodes will have certain level of rights. Whereas credits has much more fine grained. We can go to node level and assign, or even more. Coco also has what is called a coarse grained permission. How long does it take for a transaction to confirm? Ethereum does it in approximately 12 seconds. I was talking about performance. That means only 5 transactions can be performed per minute. It takes 12 seconds. In case of Hyperledger, transaction is validated within instantaneously. All the other 4 R3, Coco and credits transaction is simultaneous. The cost of transaction, Ethereum involves mining. For approving a transaction, adding a block, it involves mining. So, there is a cost to that. So, a fee must be paid for transaction and it takes time, which is one of the problems with mining based blockchains. No fee because there is no mining in Hyperledger, no fee in the case of R3. There is a cost in credits currency. Credit currency seems to implement a little bit of mining. So, there is a cost to that, whereas Coco has no cost associated. Privacy. In Ethereum, out of the box there is no privacy because it is a public chain, whereas all these others afford privacy. That means we can make it into a private chain very easily. However, Ethereum also can be done. So, this will give you some idea of what are the platforms, what do we mean by a platform, what are the current platforms available for developing blockchains, what are the strong points, what are the weaknesses, and how do we go about, how do we select them, which serves our need. So, by now you should have a good idea of what is out there in the market and what serves our purpose. And this is one more comparison between slightly different platforms, and those of you who are interested can go into more detail on this particular platform. This has gone into, it looks at things in a slightly different manner, and it has more platforms included, including Ripple. There are many more in this list. It includes Corda as we see, it includes Hyperledger, it includes Ethereum and other ones, and some of the features are exactly the same: application, smart contract, language, data model, things like that. So, this is roughly a rough introduction. It is not an easy task. Developing blockchain takes a lot of skill and effort and collaboration with various parties. Probably with this you can get an idea of how do we go about doing that, and what are the tools available for doing, what are the features and design features that I need to consider. Based on this, we can go about developing a platform. This concludes lecture number 6. Thank you.